Hello everyone and welcome to another video here on my channel. I'm Cody and today we're doing kind of a follow-up to a video I did not too long ago that we'll take a look at in just a second. But basically this has come up, this follow-up, because we are possibly looking at legacy Hornets from the Royal Australian Air Force being sent to Ukraine. Now, keep in mind, the only thing that has been reported is that discussions are happening. Realistically speaking, discussions have probably been happening behind closed doors for F-18 and F-16 for months, if not the better part of a year at this point. This is just the first time we have any kind of confirmation. Now, I'm not the only person to have thought of legacy Hornets and Super Hornets for Ukraine. Definitely not a unique idea to me. But one person that has really been highlighting this is Tyler Rogaway, who is the editor-in-chief over at the Warzone at the Drive. And he did an article back in April talking about this in more detail. And this is a great article. If you haven't read it, definitely go check it out. It really lays out a lot more of the finer points of this discussion and fills in a lot of the gaps of things that I may have overlooked or kind of glanced over, skimmed over when I was doing my video. But it is a really solid article, and yeah, it both have a lot of great information, but this, if you're down to read a fairly reasonably length article, it's not too long, not too short, you can get through it pretty quick, and it's got a lot of good information. Now, as for my video, I talk about it the most in depth, for my side of things at least, in the actual case for the Ukrainian Hornets. I do kind of make some comments about it in the Aircraft for Ukraine video I did before this, but this is really where I get into the kind of nitty-gritty. And there's a couple of things I want to point out here before I get on to the actual kind of meat and potatoes of this. As we'll see a little bit later, most likely not all 41 of the airframes in question are airworthy. So even if all 41 get sent, that doesn't mean all 41 are operable, and it means probably that some of those are going to be cannibalized for parts, I would imagine. Now, this is just based off of what I've read about the U.S. Marine Corps and its handling and its experience with its legacy Hornets. And kind of just understanding what these planes being in storage or mothballed really kind of means for their state. But that does mean that some of them could be brought back to airworthiness fairly quickly. I would imagine, quickly, quote unquote. It's not weeks, right? Yeah, this is still a months-long process at the fastest. Something else we need to consider is that these aren't just going to be flown from Australia to Ukraine. These are probably, like the MiGs we've seen before, going to be at least airlifted, if not just fully just shipped in pieces. They're probably not going to be full airframes. This is kind of where the F-16, once again, with its prolificness, would edge this out, is they wouldn't have to send F-16s necessarily across the border in parts. Now, due to, not wanting to get in direct confrontation with Russia, it still may happen that way, but there's a lot closer to Ukraine's borders than these. Something else we need to consider is Legacy Hornets don't have new parts production for the most part. They do share a lot of parts with Super Hornets, so to an extent, this may help keep some of the parts production for those shared parts for Super Hornet, keeping those lines active in the US or other countries. But it's not something that there's just like a massive pool of equipment and pieces out there. This is something that the US Marine Corps has run into pretty significantly, and having parts be delayed or just non-existent to a certain point. So this is something still to consider, especially when you're looking at how many planes is Ukraine actually going to get out of this process. Now, something that does kind of work for Ukraine in this instance is Finland and Spain both operate reasonably sized legacy Hornet fleets and are both looking to retire them effectively within like the next 5 years. So there is the possibility that at least parts could be transferred to Ukraine fairly quickly, and Kuwait also has a batch of legacy Hornets that they are retiring as well. So there are parts into the area, it's just not nearly as prolific as that of the F-16. Now onto the report itself. It's from the Australian Financial Review, as reported by Philip Corey and Andrew Tillett. And yeah, it's just saying pretty much that conversations are happening and the US is favorably disposed. So effectively what that means is the US is not probably going to send any of our legacy Hornets or any parts. Now, we may provide munitions. That's definitely something that's on the table probably. But this is something coming from the Australian Royal Air Force, and that's pretty much it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a raw deal for the Australians necessarily. Now, of course, all of this is good PR, good press, sending things to Ukraine. It definitely helps kind of foster that sense of alliance amongst everybody in the NATO, non-NATO allied alliance. But this is something I would imagine if this happened, the US would do something as far as kind of like a backroom type dealing to make sure the Australians are compensated. Probably not necessarily financially specifically, but either doing stuff with AUKUS or their Super Hornet fleet or something of that nature. But it is hard to say. That's just speculation on my part. But yeah, I mean, if the Australians are talking to the US, that means they're kind of at least in the mind to do it. The US is like, yeah, sure, that's a good idea. And the Ukrainians are probably trying to figure out how to work that in, because it's not necessarily an easy thing just to adopt. A lot of new aircraft. It's probably the most complicated thing they would have done so far. But yeah, this is something that's really cool. I mean, you can find the article, like I said, Tyler Rogaway's article is great. This is, that's great for kind of the base of what this is built on. And you can kind of have a better understanding of what F-18s have, what they bring, and what this could mean for Ukraine in like the next year. Now, one last thing I want to touch on. These have been upgraded, but these are still from a baseline production F-18 A's and B's. These are not the C's and D Legacy Hornets that the U.S. Marine Corps operates. These are like the older school ones. Now, they have been upgraded, so they're relatively comparative to that of the C and D. You're going to have your data link stuff in there. You're going to have a queuing system in the helmet. You're going to have not an AESA radar, but a more modern mechanical radar, which is kind of in line with what you would have for the CD Legacy Hornets. And you would have pretty much the full range of armament that is available to most modern U.S. aircraft. So that gives you strike capability, that gives you air-to-air capability. You're probably not going to be doing any kind of, close-in air support or anything like that. But you do have the capability to do more effective, beyond visual range, aerial combat. So whether that is your combat air patrols, whether that's interdiction, you have more capability than what the Ukrainians have now. And as far as, your standoff strike munitions, like the Storm Shadow, you have a lot of the same capability from the US, from Australia, from Finland, from Spain, depending on the state of the Spanish Air Force. If their Leopards were any kind of indication, then But this is something that I think fills more gaps than the F-16 does, and would buy some time until F-16s can get there. Right? And I've made a video talking about the F-16. I don't want to say controversy, but the typical points that are brought up against the F-16 are wildly overblown, in my opinion. and it's more really focused around air defense. Legacy Hornets can operate pretty much to the same degree that the MiG-29s are already operating. You can run them off of roadways. Now, extended periods of time of doing that, we don't really specifically know. But we do know it's possible. We do know the Finns have a lot of experience with it, so that's something that kind of goes in this favor. So you don't have to have these stationed on air bases. You don't have to have that concentration of air defense there, right? Like you would with F-16. You can put it near different civilian structures or agricultural sectors or ports, wherever you need it. You don't have to put it close to these, right? Now, once again, I want to really reiterate, like I did with tanks previously and aircraft even previously to that. If we send Hornets, we will see destroyed Hornets. Like, this is just the kind of way it goes when you're in a war. These are more modern than what the Ukrainians are rocking, but, they're still older than what the Russians would normally intended to be used, right? So yeah, there is still very real danger for these, but at least these would have a better chance of not being destroyed on the ground. And that allows the Ukrainians to really stretch their air defense network more in the short term until production for munitions for those can be built up or new systems can be built. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on it. If you have any comments, concerns, or questions, pop them in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to reply and answer. And of course, thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you in the next one.